When you think about modern art, you often picture movements that are a reaction, right,
Oh, yeah.
against tradition or war or, social norms.
Mm.
But imagine a whole art movement born specifically as an act of defiance, an act against an empire, a deliberate quest to define a nation's very soul.
And that's exactly what we're plunging into today. We're talking about the Indian New Life movement of arts, which is so much more than just an art history topic.
It really is.
It's a full-blown cultural revolution born right out of the crucible of anti-colonial struggle and this urgent need for self-definition.
Our mission today is to give you a shortcut to understanding this incredible period. We'll unpack how Indian artists, mostly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, managed to fuse these ancient philosophies with, well, really cutting-edge techniques.
And crucially, we'll see why this legacy isn't just history, it's still driving social commentary and cultural identity today.
Yeah, it's very much alive.
We've distilled a lot of material for this, everything from the movement's deep historical origins, its philosophical bedrock, all the way to post-colonial groups like the PAG, and even the sharp critical debates that still surround it. It's a dense but really necessary history.
Okay, let's get into it. To understand the beginning, we have to look at the political climate. Late 19th, early 20th century. What exactly triggered this artistic rebellion?
The trigger was pretty straightforward: nationalism and anti-colonial sentiment. The political movement for independence was completely inseparable from a cultural one.
Right.
I mean, if you're demanding political freedom, you have to simultaneously define the distinct cultural heritage you're fighting to reclaim. This just fueled a massive re-examination of India's history and heritage.
A rejection of the colonial narrative.
A total rejection of the narrative that often painted Indian culture as, static or inferior.
And this is where the Swadeshi movement comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about boycotting British textiles. It was a whole intellectual and cultural mandate.
Precisely. Swadeshi, which means of one's own country, it became the philosophical infrastructure for this whole artistic shift. It encouraged people to embrace indigenous materials, indigenous ideas.
So artists started looking inward.
That's why you see artists consciously stepping away from Western models. They start revisiting and retelling ancient epics like the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. And they weren't just illustrating stories, they were reinforcing a collective memory, building a shared indigenous national identity.
And on the canvas, that re-examination basically gave birth to the Bengal School of Art.
The Bengal School, which was spearheaded by giants like Abanindranath Tagore, was the absolute artistic foundation. Up until then, a lot of the public-facing art, think of figures like Raja Ravi Varma, was done in a very academic, very European style.
Oil paints, linear perspective, that kind of realism.
Exactly. So the art felt Indian in its subject matter, but it was, colonial in its execution. The Bengal School saw that style as a colonial imposition, a symptom of cultural mimicry. So Tagore's goal was a conscious, a deliberate departure. He looked backward, specifically to the ancient cave paintings of Ajanta.
And he adopted that famous wash technique.
Yes, the wash technique is a fantastic example of the how. It's what gives those Bengal School paintings that signature, slightly hazy, ethereal quality.
It creates a sense of mood, of spirituality that's just so different from the sharp realism of the European style.
It directly counters it. It made the art feel distinctly Indian again, drawing on Mughal and Pahari miniature traditions. But, there's an irony here.
What's that?
While they were rejecting European styles, the movement drew some inspiration from the English arts and crafts movement, which was itself a reaction against Western industrial materialism. So it was this complex, layered conversation about tradition and modernity.
And that conversation just got exponentially more complex after 1947, right? After independence. The challenge shifted. It wasn't about fighting colonial culture anymore.
It was about defining the culture of a new republic.
A whole new ballgame.
And that's when the progressive artists group, the PAG, emerged. This was a critical post-independence generation. You had founders like Francis Newton Sousa and huge names like M.F. Hussein and S.H. Raza.
So what was their mission, specifically? Because they couldn't just keep painting in the Bengal School style. India had changed so much.
Their mission was to radically redefine Indian art for the modern era. They challenged the lingering colonial narratives, and honestly, they even critiqued what they saw as the conservatism of the Bengal School itself.
They felt it become too sentimental.
A little bit, yeah. They saw the need to engage with global artistic developments, Cubism, Expressionism, but do it while expressing a distinctly new modern Indian identity. They had to fuse that internal quest with the external reality of a globalized world.
Which brings us to the really deep philosophical underpinnings of all this work. If they were defining the self, what spiritual concepts were they actually drawing on?
Oh, they dove straight into the core concepts of Indian philosophy. We're talking about Atman, the idea of the eternal self or soul.
Separate from the physical body.
Exactly. Then there's karma, the principle of cause and effect, where your actions shape your destiny. And finally, moksha, which is the ultimate spiritual liberation or release from the cycle of rebirth.
Okay, I can see how karma plays out in art that's focused on social issues, for sure. But how does a search for moksha, for spiritual liberation, how does that manifest visually in a painting?
Well, it often comes through abstraction and form. If your goal is to represent the eternal, the unbound spirit, realism suddenly becomes very limiting, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
So artists use vast, empty spaces to suggest infinity or liberation. They might use simplified primary forms to represent universal truths, or a color palette that evokes an emotional state, not a physical reality. It's a spiritual inquiry expressed through material form.
That really makes the abstract concrete.
Yeah.
The challenge then becomes how to talk about these huge philosophical concepts
Yeah.
while still connecting with a mass audience.
And that is where the genius of using recognizable cultural symbols comes in. They act as these anchors, rooting the abstract ideas in everyday life.
Let's talk about the Nimbu Mirchi, that lemon and chili motif. It's such a fantastic example of taking a powerful cultural symbol and just repurposing it.
It is. The Nimbu Mirchi is traditionally hung outside homes to ward off the evil eye, the Buri Nizar.
Right.
So when contemporary artists use the symbol, they instantly connect with viewers on this really visceral cultural level. They take this familiar symbol of superstition and protection, and they turn it into a commentary on modern vulnerability or identity or even cultural preservation.
It's a marker of heritage addressing contemporary anxieties.
Perfectly put. It's the perfect illustration of what the sources called transformation through art, taking something mundane and giving it this profound new meaning.
Repurposing the everyday.
That's the engine of the movement. It's
Right.
illustrating the potential for societal change. When you see an everyday object transformed, it suggests that society itself can also be transformed. The art addresses critical issues head-on: the environmental crisis, globalization, migration. It's screaming that art is not a luxury separate from life.
It's a catalyst for life.
Yes, a catalyst for life, transformed.
And that idea of art as a catalyst leads us directly into the contemporary scene, which has moved way beyond just national identity and is now squarely focused on social responsiveness.
Absolutely. The contemporary movement is just a melting pot of global influences. We see pivotal figures defining feminist viewpoints, addressing identity, vulnerability. Think of artists like Arpita Singh or Nalini Milani.
And the structure of the movement is shifting too, right? It's becoming more collective, more installation-based. Tell us about the Rosa Jadeli movement.
The Rosa Jadeli movement really emphasizes collaborative, process-oriented art, often large installations, performance art. The key thing is that it prioritizes community engagement and dialogue. It moves art out of the exclusive gallery space and into public forums.
It's less about the individual genius.
And more about the collective experience, the shared responsibility.
So this is where artivism really comes into its own.
Yeah.
We're talking about art as a tool for direct social and political action.
Exactly, and we have some really powerful examples. Take the Nagpur-based artist Shweta Batad. Her work often involves sculptures and live performances where she physically embodies the issues she's protesting.
Things like farmer exploitation, women's safety.
Yes, and education, often in rural contexts. Her performances are designed to be immediate confrontational.
And what about artists addressing regional conflicts?
Via Munshi is a prime example there. His paintings and installations often tackle the incredibly complex socio-political issues in the Kashmir Valley displacement memory. By blending traditional imagery with these stark modern forms, he facilitates critical dialogues on belonging, on trauma,
Creating images that resonate universally.
because they speak to the human experience under duress. And this blending of traditional and modern makes the message legible to a global audience.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. We've talked about the philosophy, the activism. Let's look at the practical, real-world returns. Why does all this matter to the average citizen, to the local economy?
It matters deeply because it fosters community bonds and social cohesion.
It brings people together.
It does. Research clearly shows that arts participation heals social isolation and unifies diverse groups. We have found compelling stats, even from the US, saying 72% of Americans believe the arts unify communities. And this is hugely amplified in India, where artists often work directly with marginalized groups, empowering them.
And preserving cultural heritage.
Yes, ensuring traditional techniques weaving, miniature painting don't die out, which also provides essential economic stability for artisans.
And the economic contributions themselves are not small. When we talk about cultural activity, we're talking about a significant financial engine.
We have to anchor this. While the sources highlight the sheer size of the U.S. arts sector, an $878 billion industry supporting millions of jobs, that principle is mirrored intensely in India through cultural tourism.
Right, you think about places like Jaipur, which relies so heavily on its traditional crafts,
Yeah.
or the big art fairs in Mumbai and Delhi.
Every successful gallery opening, every museum visit, every purchase of local handicrafts isn't just a cultural exchange, it's stimulating local economies.
Absolutely.
The arts are a powerful magnet for tourism. They generate vital income for local merchants, hotels, services. It's been estimated that for every rupee spent on an art event, more spending happens throughout the community. It's a critical piece of the local economic puzzle.
So we have this massive, powerful, transformative movement. But, no movement is without its critics. And we need to give a complete picture by talking about the significant criticism it faced, especially in its early nationalist stages.
This is crucial for balance. You had prominent critics at the time, Akshay Kumar Maitreya, Ananda Kumar Swamy, Stella Kramsrich. They all expressed serious reservations about the heavy nationalist agenda of the Bengal School.
So what was the core issue with the nationalism? I mean, they were trying to define India. Wasn't that the whole point?
The concern was that in seeking a single, distinct Indian aesthetic, the movement leaned too heavily on, say, upper caste Hindu mythology and northern artistic traditions.
So it risked excluding or oversimplifying the diverse cultures across India.
Exactly. Kumaraswamy did the point that while the Bengal School was a revolutionary shift in taste away from European art, public disillusionment grew as the nationalist fervor waned. The art started to feel a bit uniform rather than representative of the country's complexity.
It tried to fit the infinite complexity of India into one nationalist box.
You could say that. And this struggle extended to the theories themselves. Ordhendo Kumar Ganguly articulated the Sadanga theory, trying to codify the 6 essential limbs of painting:
Form, proportion, emotion.
grace, resemblance, and technical skill.
It sounds like a rigorous framework. Why was it so divisive?
It was divisive because any attempt to codify Indian aesthetics into one rigid framework was seen by some as fundamentally unrepresentative, overly prescriptive. It was trying to create a rule book for something that was inherently fluid and varied by region.
It highlights that central complexity of defining identity in a post-colonial world. But the debate today is much more mature than that, isn't it?
It is. Modern critics generally agree that the juxtaposition of national identity and international artistic influences shouldn't be seen as opposing forces anymore.
Meaning the art doesn't have to choose between being authentically Indian or globally resonant.
Precisely. The contemporary view is that these elements can and should inform one another, enriching the overall narrative. It's an acknowledgement that Indian art is strongest when it absorbs, translates, and then speaks back to the global art world.
So after more than a century of this evolution, what's the lasting legacy?
Well, the Progressive Artists Group, the PAG, is rightly seen as a cornerstone of Indian modern art. You see major exhibitions commemorating its 75-year impact. And the principles they championed continue to inspire contemporary artists to tackle modern social issues, gender, the environment, using the visual language established during this movement.
And that openness has undeniably led to global recognition.
Without a doubt. Through consistent, impactful participation in major international art fairs, Indian artists have achieved unprecedented visibility. By embracing both innovative modern techniques and deeply traditional themes, the New Life movement really achieved its goal. It defined Indian art, but then it allowed that definition to evolve, to breathe, and to compete on the global stage.
That leads us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward, building on that very debate. The movement began by consciously rejecting European influence to assert a distinct national identity. But today, the most impactful art often involves cross-cultural exchange. So if we accept that national history and international influence should inform rather than oppose, Does true artistic identity lie not in rigidly defining what it is against, but what it is resilient enough to be open to?
A powerful lens through which to view the next century of Indian creativity, something really worth exploring.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel well equipped to explore these concepts, the movements, and the incredible artists further.